And reading, I'm a teacher, and all of that was just very ingrained in me. And reading, I too don't remember exactly how I learned to read, but I remember reading. I remember reading with my mom. And so I did the same things with my kids. Read to them every night. We did story time at the Provo City Library. We did the flashcards, whatever. My daughter produced the results I thought I would see. She was literally reading Harry Potter by the end of kindergarten. She was kind of just an automatic reader. And I prematurely patted myself on the back a little bit because I did the exact same things with my son. Didn't get quite the same results. So let me explain kind of what happened. So my son looked like he was reading, but I'd started to see things like this, and you will see this with your students. He'd read a word one line, the same word would appear just a few lines later, and he'd act like he'd never seen it before. He'd start to sound out a word, struggle with it, maybe get 2 letters in, and he'd just take his eyes off the page and start guessing. I thought, what is that? It's like, here, I don't understand the process there. What are you doing? He'd get a phonetically more complex word that maybe he shouldn't have gotten at the time, like house. It's got a lot going on there, vowel digraph, lots of things, silent E. But he couldn't get it, right? So from my little understanding of reading, because I definitely wasn't taught how to teach reading in a secondary background, we were focused on vocabulary and comprehension strategies, those top parts, right? And writing, essays, to develop a fantastic 5-paragraph essay. Well, not only did I see this in my son, but I get to the lockdown facility, which is kind of a different animal in and of itself, and over half of my junior high and high school students couldn't read on grade level, not even close. They didn't prepare me for that. And because I just thought, well, they're not comprehending, what do I do with that? And I think you probably mentioned today, like you did last time, about the most important thing teachers to be empowered with, the Utah State study, is the ability to teach reading. Because it doesn't matter what subject you teach. I've gone to high schools all over where math teachers have stopped teaching math and taught this because their kids can't pass the math test in high school because they can't read it. They can't read the directions. If your kids can't read, it doesn't matter how fantastic everything else you do is, they can't access the information you're sharing with them. Not independently anyway. And that's where the really empowerment comes for them. So from a mother's perspective, I knew something wasn't clicking because I knew how bright my son was. Could build Lego things that I didn't even have a concept for. I'm like, who are you? He'd build toys out of like toilet paper dispensers and batteries and, but he couldn't read. This stuff was popping up and I'd done the same things. So what was the disconnect? Well, I had a moment of grace. I went to the doctor's office with one of my kids and pulled a magazine off the shelf, and it just kind of fell open to an article that was an excerpt from Dr. Sally Shaywitz's book, Overcoming Dyslexia. It was symptomatic of struggling readers. And as I went through it, it was literally one of those moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, that's him, that's him, that's him, that's him, that's him. And I thought, dyslexia, backwards, what is that? Like I was clueless what that was. But I thought, this is him, this is different. They're saying it's different. It's the way their brain is wired, it's the way they look at the page. This is him. It affects the way he follows directions when I give him directions. Just everything. So the interesting thing is I worked with him just enough that he didn't qualify for any special services. As she mentioned, the culture at home, if you've got parents who help them, they won't fall 2 years behind, they don't qualify for pullout, and they're in your mainstream classroom, and you've got to know how to help them. If you think you're going to get off because you're not teaching special ed, you're wrong, okay? Because you will have every type of LD in your classroom, every type. So my son didn't qualify for services other than speech. And I realized that if he was going to get help, it was going to have to be me. So initially that was incredibly overwhelming, and now it's become the greatest blessing in my life because the journey I've got to share with him, I trained and certified in a few different methodologies, and the one I'm going to share with you today is one of them. And the reason I'm with them and not somebody else is because out of all the Orton Gillingham programs I have seen, this is the simplest, it's the most effective consistently, and it's the most empowering for me as a teacher and for the students that I tutor with, and I've worked with as young as 4 and as old as 61 and seen great results. On average, by the time they complete our program, they see a 2 to 5 reading grade level jump in about 40 to 50 hours. Huge when you're closing the gap. So I'm going to give you some resources at the end for you if you're interested in this and you want to look in it more, because the fact that Dr. Sharp was able to make this happen is pretty amazing. She's such an advocate for this type of instruction, because usually colleges are very about showing any type of program or things, because you end up teaching the program a lot of times just what your school's adopted when you go teach there, right? But if you can know what a good program looks like, what you're looking for, then you can stand up and be really strong about, you know what, if it doesn't have this, this, and this is not going to reach all my kids, and I'm not okay with that. This was a study done at Harvard by Dr. Jean Chall looking at developing readers and what happens here. About 70% they discovered are going to learn to read regardless of what you do. You could literally sit in the back of your classroom and play on Facebook, and your kids are going to learn to read. About, at least half of them, 70%. It's kind of like my daughter, I mean, I probably did help her some, but she would have been a great reader probably without me. She was just a good reader. She was on an automatic reader. But that 30% absolutely have to have a different type of instruction. If they don't, what happens, we all compensate, right? For our weaknesses, we sort of just adjust. So when they don't handle the word the same way an automatic reader does, seeing the parts and the pieces and the patterns, they memorize. They memorize the word as an entire picture. It's like if we looked at a piece of art and we understand the art conceptually, but we have no concept that it's made out of individual brush strokes, right? So they understand the whole word conceptually, they can memorize it, but they don't recognize that it's made up of parts and patterns. They don't see it that way, so they memorize the whole word. Well, we can do that to an extent. There's only so much our brain can hold that way, right? About 4th grade is when our vocabulary begins to exceed what we can memorize, which is why you'll see readers plateau at a 4th grade reading level right around there between 3rd, 4th, and 5th and stay. And they'll get up in high school and they're still at a 4th grade reading level. It is no small thing that 70% of those in correctional facilities read below a 4th grade reading level. Most state correctional facilities determine future bed numbers based upon 4th grade reading scores. Okay? It's life-changing. Not just will this kid graduate, what is this kid's life going to be like? That makes it a little more heavy when you think about that, right? But here's the great thing. You've got the right tools, then you can empower them and change the course of their life forever. Because that 30%, I've seen that number where I'm at in the nation be higher. I very seldom see it lower, but I've seen it much higher. But that number, regardless of how much, when it's a face, when it's just one in your classroom, that's my son. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. So for him, this is what's made a huge difference, and for a lot that I've been able to work with. This program was designed to teach to that 30%, but it's absolutely fantastic for all your students, because what's good for those that struggle is great for those that don't. It's just empowering them with really strong skills. So these are things that I mentioned that I saw with my son. These are things you will see in your students. And I want to explain to you what that means to maybe help you avoid what I did, where I was like, I don't understand what this means. What do I do with this? Okay? So there's very strong reasons for this. Now, so this was a study done by Dr. Sally and Bennett Shaywitz at Yale. They took 61 individuals. 29 had been pre-diagnosed as dyslexic, okay? They started with, thankfully, with the functioning MRI, we didn't have to wait anymore like we used to, where we had to wait post-mortem and then slice their head open and see what parts of the brain, right? If there was an injury in a certain part, then we'd say, oh, that was connected to X, right? But now with the MRI, the functioning MRI, we can see that. So they started with letter to sound correspondence and built to progressively more complex reading tasks to look at what was happening in the brain. Have you ever had anybody tell you you're more left-brained or you're more right-brained? You heard that before? Okay, it's kind of a gross generalization, but there's actual truth there. The hemispheres process information differently. The left hemisphere processes information from a part to whole perspective. It starts with the simplest pieces and builds to the final outcome, to the more complex. So that's why you're more step by step, okay? And the processing is based upon sequence. The right side of your brain goes whole to part. You get big idea, coming back down is harder. But it's based, and the way you process right hemisphere is based upon spatial orientation. So, which side do you think would make more sense to use in reading? Part to whole, sequential. That's how our reading works, right? It's like part to whole, and we work left to right sequentially on the page in our language to produce the word and understanding print knowledge and all those things, the print concepts of print that she talked about, all of that, okay? Most of us do. My daughter did. My son did not. This was the unimpaired student. The left side lit up like Christmas tree lights, like they were thinking, okay? We have the verbal vocabulary in the front, and we had the visuospatial back here, 3 little modules that work together in the occipital and parietal lobes to take the print, connect it to what we've learned orally. That's why the oral language is first. Make those connections, and we're able to read when we do the letter to sound mapping and then build throughout there. Now, the 29 that had been pre-diagnosed, this was their brain scan. The back part, the visuospatial part, didn't fire because it wasn't even wired to fire. Now we know why that's a challenge for him, yeah? Verbal vocabulary stays intact and is actually overused, which is why your kids can speak on grade level but can't read on grade level, okay, if they're native English speakers. ELL is kind of a different animal. Well, if you're not accessing that, the brain has to get visual perception somewhere, right? Goes over to the right side. How does that process again? Whole to part and based upon spatial orientation. So you memorize the word as an entire picture, which explains all those 3 things that I said you will see and I saw in my son. My son could remember a word like house that was more orthographically, spelling pattern unique, and he could connect a visual to. I can picture house, so I can pull it from that side. House. It, how do you picture it? Right? You can't. You can only do it phonetically. Okay? So he was at a loss. It's why he could recognize a word one line, but see that same word a few lines later and act like he didn't know what it was. Because he wasn't processing the word phonetically. His ability to recall that word from his memory, if he's stored it already, was based upon position on the page, proximity, space, proximity to the picture, concrete nouns around it. You take it out of that situation, can't recognize it, right? So all of those things mean your student might not be handling the page the way most do, the automatic do, okay? Those are red flags. Those are red flags. It doesn't mean they have full-blown anything, but it just means there's some issues there. There's some issues there. The greatest thing about that, and I'm going to jump back for just a second though, regardless of what the LD is or what you're dealing with, okay, it is 80% of what ends up in special education is a language processing disorder. 80%. It's what you're dealing with most of the time. But in most cases, it has 0 to do with their intelligence. 0. They're brilliant, smart as all get out. But let me give you a very personal example. I didn't have phonics. I had whole language. My spelling, horrible. So every time I send an email, I do spell check like 9,000 times because as a professional, I'm so nervous that if I send it to someone and I have misspelled something, what are they going to think I am? Stupid. When that has nothing to do with my intelligence. But if I, as an adult, an intelligent, successful adult, makes that connection, you better believe your sweet little students will. They'll feel dumb. And it has nothing to do with it. One of the things that I say in presentations all the time is if the teachers walk away with nothing else, you look at those kids in the eye and you say, your struggles with reading have nothing to do with your intelligence. Because no one thinks to tell them that. And that shifts everything for them, because it doesn't. They simply need taught in a way that will help rewire their brain and make sense to them and be able to open those doors for them. But if we don't give them that, you guys, their whole course has changed. Their whole course has changed. The greatest thing about that is, from that study, that if they're given this type of instruction, the brain can be rewired. If we catch it before age 8, it can be rewired completely. We can save 30% of our students from spending the rest of their educational career in special education. So that's my 2-second soapbox. Why this type of instruction isn't mandated K-3. You know, we're getting closer, thankfully, with research and all these mandates that have come down. But there's still some misconceptions. Basil's, your core reading program that you'll get to teach in elementary school, will have a phonics piece. And so they'll say, we've got phonics, we're good. Okay, if it's not research-based, if it's not systematic, if it's not explicit, if it's not sequential, and if it's not multisensory, not going to work for all your students. And that's the problem, is we've had this misconception that if there was phonics there, it was okay. No, what I have learned is that it is far more about the process than it is about the content. You can have all the content there, but the way you instruct it in everything, not just in phonics, but in everything. The process of how you instruct is what makes the difference for your students, not the content. So when you understand what processes are most effective, then that changes everything. So the process is what is so important. I know for me, I was like living up here with my older students. If they were struggling in comprehension, then I'd bust out some more comprehension strategies. Vocabulary, let's do some more vocabulary cards. And I was wondering and didn't understand why I still wasn't seeing the gains that I thought. Because it's a pyramid for a reason. If they're struggling here, make no mistake, that means there's a deficit here. Without question. I still get so frustrated when teachers don't get that. They're like, well, no, but I don't understand. How do we help the comprehension? You fix this, and then this fixes. This, and then this fixes. Because when this is automatic, this just naturally rises. Have you ever driven anywhere for the first time? You're like, radio's lower. Shh, don't talk to me. I'm paying attention. I got to know which street signs I'm going on, right? But today, you probably left your apartment and got here and have no idea what happened in the interim because you've driven here so many times. You're like, I have no idea what just happened there, right? It's amazing you didn't like get in a wreck on the way here because you're just like focusing on other stuff because the process of getting here is automatic. The same thing needs to happen with reading. If that's automatic, if looking at the word and knowing how to decode that is automatic, they don't have to labor through every single word, then this naturally comes up. Does that make sense? Right? So we want automaticity in those bottom pieces. So the National Reading Panel, clear back. Again, this is about the process. Okay, and I'm going to explain what all of these things mean. Explicit, systematic, sequential, multisensory. Okay? Explicit means you're going to start with the simplest part and build to the more complex. You're not going to start with the CK digraph until you've taught C and K. Okay? Because you've got to start with the simplest thing you've got to build. If their brain doesn't process sequentially, you have to teach sequentially to make those connections in a multisensory fashion across hemispheres, yeah? So, multisensory, okay? That's vital. So, you think about reading and writing. It's all sensory input, motor output. When you're reading, what sensory input are you using? Your eyes. When you're listening to me, what sensory input? When you're taking notes, what motor output? Okay, your hand, you're writing. When you're speaking, what motor output? Your mouth. All of those are not connected on their own. We make those connections with the way that we do things. So would it not make sense then that the most effective type of language instruction would incorporate all those modalities simultaneously every time? Yes. Don't ever just show your kids a letter. They should see it, say it, write it, work with it, all of that. And not talk about, like, show a picture in the morning and then draw a picture of it later in the afternoon. If it's not back to back, it's not multisensory. Okay, it's got to be within real time, really quick. So we'll talk about some ways that that's manifested in this program, some really great things that you can use with any kind of instruction. That really kinesthetic, active, involving all the senses type of experience. Okay, so what do you guys do? Feel a little overwhelmed? Okay, not so much. It's very easy. You teach the way research has shown to be the most effective. You know what that is, you teach that way. You teach the way your students' brains learn. My favorite quote is, if your students aren't learning the way you teach, maybe you should teach the way they learn. Okay, you got to be able to roll with that. And you empower yourselves with as many skills as possible, because when you get in the classroom, you need a million tools in your tool bag simply because you will have one child that just doesn't fit with all the normal tools. And you want to know how to help them, yeah? So the more tools you have, the better off you are, the more confident you feel as a teacher. That's absolutely, what we want. So this was from the International Dyslexia Association looking at 5 key things of the way phonics should be taught. So when you get to teaching, you're looking and evaluating with your curriculum team a phonics program. If it doesn't follow these 5, throw it out. Okay? I'll be very bold about that. Okay? It needs to be explicit and sequential. Usually that, and with the multisensory piece, if it's an Orton-Gillingham-based program, you know that those 2 are covered. Those core, like it's really 4 or 5 things, are covered. Okay? You want constant reinforcement, a way to assess and adjust your instruction very immediately, which we do through a process called dictation, something that moves quickly for your students, particularly the older grades you teach, 3rd, 4th, 5th. man, I'll tell you right now, if they don't see progress because they're already frustrated with themselves, their self-esteem struggle, if they don't see some gains, they're done. They're done. I don't see some progress, yeah, whatever, this isn't working. They need to see gains quickly. Employs a marking system. Now, why a marking system? So the marking system, remember when I said it was like looking at an entire picture without understanding it was made out of brush strokes? They look at a word as an entire picture. They don't see the parts. Well, they are very different visually. If they can have a visual indicator that triggers for them, hey, when you see this, that means you say it like this. Connect the visual end to the RL, the phonological end, okay, so what they see to what they hear and say. Then it starts making those connections. One of the reasons I love this marking system is because there's no unnecessary markings. We don't mark things just so you can just mark stuff. Woohoo! No. Every marking either determines pronunciation or movement in syllabication. Let me say that again. Every marking either determines pronunciation or movement in syllabication, okay? You get stuff, there's a lot of great programs out there, but to me, some of them feel like there's more stuff than maybe is needed, and for some kids, that bogs them down when they could move a little faster if it was a little bit simplified, yeah? So, do you guys know that you brush your teeth exactly the same every day? Unless you consciously pay attention to it and try to change it. We brush it in the exact same order, how long, what tooth, and we're not even aware of it. To change processes like that, because your students will come in with their own automatic processes of how they handle the page and a lot of times. Again, it's about intentionally teaching in a way that's going to help rewire and change those processes if they're incorrect and lay the foundation if they just need that foundation laid in a correct way with that explicit and sequential type of process. Chunking information in simple frameworks. These two, just so you know, part of the diagnosis now for ADD, any of the language processing, ALLD, oral and written language learning deficit, dyslexia, dysgraphia, anything along those lines, part of the diagnosis now is an executive function deficiency. That is a part of the brain that does four main things: filters information, prioritizes information, categorizes, and connects. Your students will struggle with those things. They have a working memory deficit. So you'll feel like you've got something on Monday and the kids will lose it by Wednesday. It's not you. It's just the way that they struggle with. So we want to chunk information for working memory help. Use simple frameworks that they're going to use over and over and over again to teach new information. Our framework is dead simple. 42 sounds of English language we go through. 5 phonetic skills, okay, to teach the concept of basic single syllable patterns and syllable types, and 2 decoding skills. What was the study? What did they figure out? How many units of information can we hold in our memory at one time? 7. 7. Okay, you get 30 rules, you get 100 rules, that gets lost. Keep it simple, keep it short. 7 we can do. That's why our phone numbers are 7 digits. Now we have to remember the area code too, but yeah. Okay, the idea was 7. So, our processes are all the same. As far as consistent, I guess is a better word. They're consistent because they need consistency. And this will affect far more than just their reading. You know, my son, because they're processing language sequential and holding it in working memory, and they process language slower, I would say to him, you know, hey Tyler, I need you to go up to your room and I need you to make your bed and pick up your clothes and pick up your toys. And I'd get this. Tyler, did you hear me? I need you to, to go upstairs and I need you to make your bed and pick up your toys and pick up your clothes. I don't know what you just said. I'd get tears or I'd get mad. I don't know what you want me to do. What you want me to do? And a lot of kids with language processing disorders are misdiagnosed early as ADD. Now, there's a comorbid effect, and what I mean by that is a lot of times you'll see both, but their attention issues will come just to language because of the way they're processing, and they're not truly ADD. They have a language processing issue. We thought my son was ADD because I'm like, hello, did you not hear me? And I feel so bad when I realized what was going on. The poor little guy was still trying to process the first thing, but he couldn't hold it in memory long enough, and he got to the last thing, but he knew there was something else. And what was it? And oh my gosh, was there an order to it? Do I have to keep it in order? Because I don't remember it in order. One direction at a time. One thing you can do from the start to be a fantastic teacher, give one direction at a time unless you give a visual representation of more than one step. That will save the lives of so many of your students because that's so hard for them, yeah? So, One thing at a time is the way we teach phonics. One thing at a time. We're not teaching 3 or 4 things at a time. One concept at a time. Okay, we want to stay simple. I am going to take you through the sequence of our method as much as I can get through some of the core things. It's like on your second page in, I'm going to start with alphabet. Why would I start with the alphabet? With letters, sounds. Why? Why don't I start with combinations or whatever? Yeah, basic. Yeah, we're starting explicit. Dead on. Okay, yeah, we're starting explicit. We're starting with simple letter to sound correspondence. There's a few things we need to do when we teach the letters. We need to teach letter identification. A lot of times in those lower grades, actual letter formation, yeah. And then blending, because our goal is to read. Our end goal is to read. So we want to teach the name and the sound of the letter. A lot of programs will sometimes separate those. We do them simultaneously. They learn the name of the letter is A, the sound of the letter is A. And they say that. The name of the letter is A, the sound of the letter is A. Okay? We teach formation. Just a couple notes on formation. Very, very interesting. Kids who have a different spatial orientation, this was my son to a T. He, in preschool, could not, you know how you always start at the top line and you draw it down, right? For like most of the letters, you start topping. He would always bottom line back up. And I see this all over with teachers telling me the same things. This is spatially, if I'm up here and I start my letter at the top line and draw down, that was down. But if I'm at my desk and you tell me to draw down, spatially, did I just actually draw down? No. I just drew towards myself. And you've got a kid who's hung up on spatial orientation, you tell him to draw down, that makes no sense to him. Don't say draw down. Start away from yourself, draw towards yourself. Okay? Use spatial orienters, use stickers on the paper, start at the red star and draw out towards the green star, whatever. But be aware of their spatial orientation. That can become a real issue for them because they're anchored in that, yeah? So watch that. And they'll also, ones that have spatial orientation issues will always orient everything to themselves. So they'll always start closest to themselves and work out as well. That's their anchor, okay? So they're not trying to be little poops. They're just really trying to anchor themselves, okay? Now, blending. This is where our biggest issue is, okay? There's so many kids that do this. K, a, t. You try to get them to do it faster. K, at, k, at, k, at. And we're still not getting that word, right? We're just kind of each sound going on. There's a lot of reasons for that. It can be a phonological working memory where they do k, a, t, tag. They can't hold it in memory long enough in sequence to recall that first sound. So they start with the most recent sound and guess and go back. Okay? That's telling you they need a little help. They need to chunk some information. We need to work on that left-to-right processing. This concept of the slide is literally the most powerful thing. Really? Now I can't move it. You're really going to get to see this most powerful thing. The concept of the slide eliminates that recency effect and helps because we're chunking that consonant in the vowel sound. When I come back here, we teach our letters. We teach the alphabet in bite-sized chunks. We do 4 consonants with 1 vowel. Okay, so we teach them in sets. Because you say a consonant in isolation, never actually. So when you say our sound is well, I'm not going to run to the store. That's not a pretty old leaf on the tree. But we change the pronunciation. Pronunciation comes going from that consonant to that vowel sound. So we want to practice that. So they're learning name, sound, uppercase, lowercase formation, and then we're going to put it for blending into the slide. So they learn that the vowel sound is a, okay? Research has shown, you've seen all the alphabet cards, right? With pictures. Great help, especially for those who struggle. What research has now come out and shown is that a gesture is more powerful for memory recall than a picture. So if you can have a gesture for each of the vowel sounds, but particularly for the vowel sounds, our program does, you can make the difference between them taking 2 months to learn a vowel sound and a day. I've seen it like immediate. So the vowel sound gesture for A that we suggest is a, like you're taking a bite of an apple. A. Just hold your hand up like you're taking a bite of an apple. A. And you can get so every time you do the vowel a, you do that. And then you eventually don't even have to give the verbal prompt. And that recalls for them immediately. What is that sound? Notice I'm only teaching the short sound of A. I'm not doing the long sound because I'm focusing on one thing at a time. If I'm working on blending, I don't want them having to go, which sound am I blending? Which sound am I blending? Yeah? One sound. That's all I want them to worry about right now. So A sound is a, B sound is ba. What's my slide? Ba. Because we don't want to go ba-a, we want ba and da. The slide arrow indicates two things for them. One, that it's not a real word, and two, that they're going to process that left to right. So that's going to help with the sequential processing, okay? Now you can hear the difference if all you have to do is roll on an ending sound, ba, g, as opposed to ba, a, g. See the difference in the ability to recognize that word? So you want to chunk those two letters together, and then all you have to do is roll on that ending sound, okay? Notice we drop the slide arrow. We talk about the pattern of a word, initially a CVC pattern, because most words have a beginning sound, a middle vowel sound, and an ending sound. So we teach that pattern first. We drop the slide arrow, and we identify the vowel by marking an X underneath. We are intentionally laying the foundation to identify the vowels because later on they're going to prove the vowel's pronunciation. Okay, they're going to prove the vowel's pronunciation. Now, is that a real word? No. Okay, nonsense words. Oh my goodness, they're glorious, okay? Cannot talk about them enough. Nonsense words, nonsense words, nonsense words, because you will have these really bright little kids that will come in, you're like, oh my gosh, they're reading so well, da-da-da-da. And by the way, they're reading so well because they've memorized all those words. And if you give them nonsense words, they are a hot mess because they don't know phonetically what's really going on. The only way to check is to give them nonsense words in instruction and assessment, okay? Nonsense words are your best friend. We use an asterisk because you want some sort of visual differentiator when they're learning words, you know, to know is this a real one, is this a funny word, whatever you decide to call it. Okay, then you've got that going on. All right. We do teach sight words. You always want to teach sight words in correlation with phonics because there's some that they need to know very quickly, that you don't talk about always all the phonetic aspects at first because they need to be able to transfer to reading. And some also don't play fair phonetically. Okay, not a large percentage, but some, most of them are those high frequency words, so we teach those. They can do sentence structure and all of that. This is our letter sets. Please look at the vowel order and tell me what you notice. They're not in your traditional. Yes, they're not A-E-I-O-U, right? We do that to be completely annoying and obnoxious. No, not really. That's actually a very big reason why we do that. Which two are the closest in sound? E and I. They're the hardest to differentiate auditorily and the slightest mouth change when you produce that sound. So they create the most problems. One of the things that I've learned for every student, but particularly for struggling students, never, ever, 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 ever teach concepts that are similar, yet slightly different, too close in time, or you'll create more confusion than you ever will clarity. Separate them. Like I thought I was doing a really great thing teaching synonyms and antonyms the same day in high school, but I wondered why some of my kids, because I was doing like a Venn diagram, I was rocking it. But all my kids were a little confused, and that didn't make sense to me. But it's because I had a really strong concept of both of those before I came in and compared them. Well, they didn't, right? They needed to know synonyms and be proficient in that for a couple of days, and then we could bring in antonyms. Same thing. They need to be proficient in before they're cool with taking on I. That's all it is a chin drop. I. That's it. So tiny. Let me show you the vowel cues for all of these. Okay, I'm going to do it fast. A, to show the chin drop. Ah, like the shape of the letter O and the tongue depressor. Ah, okay. And then like you got hit in the stomach with the ball. And itch. So every time I do the vowel sounds, and you can make up your own, the more that they show jaw placement and things are helpful, okay? But that can be really, really big. Okay, so CK. I took that a little bit out of alphabetical order, yeah? Actually, I'll even give a t-shirt right now to somebody who can tell me, why do we spell cat with C and kitten with K? It's the same animal, same hard cuss sound. Why on earth do we change the spelling? What? Say it.
Is it the vowel that changes it?
It is the vowels that change it. Here's what. It is the vowels. I'm going to get in trouble from Angie. I just gave it away, Angie. She in here? Okay. We've got more. So here's the thing. This is a hard and fast rule when you're spelling with C and K. C will take A, O, and U, and K will take the other two every time. Crazy, right? You're thinking right now like, I never knew that, right? I know. I was on your side table like, hello, I'm a teacher. How do I not know that? Or you can say K will take I and E and C will take the other three. You all know it intuitively, because if I gave you like C followed by I or E, it would say like city, sent. You know that intuitively, but nobody's explicitly explained it to you this way. So how cool is that to be able to do that for your students and explicitly point that out? Why we don't teach C and K to the last letter set? You should never teach C and K before they know all their vowels because they can't spell correctly with C and K unless they know their vowels. So it kills me every time I go in and see reading programs using K3 that they're teaching C and K early on. Well, hello. They can't spell correctly unless they know all their vowels, yeah? So C will take A, O, and U, and K will take the other two. Say that with me. C will take A, O, and U, and K will take the other two. Good, got it. Okay? So right now we're doing CVC patterns. All of our words are used in context sentence, so we're building vocabulary. And every time after we model, we do the multisensory piece of guided practice called dictation. This is where the power lies. Grab your whiteboard, sock, and marker, please. Okay, so couple of things. You want to use whiteboards, not pencil and paper, even if you've got older students, because I do this with adults. When you use large motor skills, you employ the frontal hemisphere as opposed to the different parts that are employed when you use fine motor skills. Frontal hemisphere deals with memory and helps cross your hemispheres. Okay? Large motor skills are ideal, which is why they suggest like air writing of letters when they're little. You're crossing midline, you've got lots going on. All those things are great. Okay? So a couple of rules, I guess, guidelines that I have on this. I want you to write in a column. So what I mean by that, I'm going to still, this yellow one may or may not show up. Can you see it okay? Oh, ooh, it's kind of not even, yeah, there you go. So if I gave you this letter and then let's say I gave you this slide, you see how I'm writing away from myself and then towards myself for you guys, okay? I also don't want you to erase unless I tell you to erase, and I'll give you an example as to why that's important. Here's the process. I'm going to say it twice. You're going to say it twice. You're going to write it once and hold it up for me. So I'm going to say it twice. You're going to say it back twice. You're going to write it once and hold it up. How many times am I going to say it? Twice. How many times are you going to say it? Twice. How many times are you going to write it? Once. Okay. So what I just did is also called a feedback loop that helps with working memory issues. You just have them kind of feed back to you parts of the information. So let's try it. Here we go. Uppercase B, uppercase B. Uppercase B, uppercase B. Write it once. Hold it up and show me. Now remember, you got to leave yourself room because you're going to be writing more. If you didn't, I'll let you erase right now and kind of adjust because we're going to write a column, yeah? Really fantastic uppercase B's. Nice. Okay, underneath that or more towards yourself, I want you to keep it on your paper. Okay, so here we go. Lowercase f, lowercase f, lowercase f, lowercase f. Okay, hold it up and show me. Now, this is my favorite, and I see this with teachers too. Awesome. Here we go. Every time I have you guys say it back to me, I have some of you that are like, oh my gosh, this is so stupid. Why am I saying this back? I feel like an idiot, right? Okay? Let me explain why that is so important. Students who have language processing disorders have a deficit in one or both of the phonological loop and the orthographic loop. They are a loop. Sensory input, motor output, sensory input. I'm going to do this turbo speed, but the phonological loop is this. It starts from eyes to mouth to ear. See it, say it, hear it, perceive what you just said. The orthographic loop picks up where the phonological loop left off, and I'll move because I know I'm in your guys' way. Goes from your ear to your hand, that motor output this time, then to your eyes. So you hear it, you write it, and then you read it. If you've got a kid with dysgraphia, they have this deficit and fine motor issues. So my son does. Taking notes is a hot mess for him, okay? Here's the thing. Dyslexia, dysgraphia, or language learning deficit, all deficits here. The only way to fix them is to use them back to back over and over and over again. If you don't say it, you're missing a vital piece of the phonological loop. Your students have to say it back. We talked about this for spelling and for vocabulary. I had a student that I pulled out for, I pulled him out for intervention. He was in 5th grade. He was failing all his spelling tests, right? That was a big issue for him. His mom came to me in tears. Please, will you get him to do his spelling? Can you get it clear that he can do spelling with you? I I said yes. I went in and talked to the counselor, I talked to the teacher, and I pulled him in to do spelling. 2 things I did right away. I dropped his words from 20 to 10. That's about all he could handle working memory-wise. And then I changed his spelling test based upon phonetic concepts that we were working on, not grade level lists, because all that assesses is how well he memorized. Your spelling test should be based on phonetic and orthographic patterns. Okay? So I did those 2 things. He got about half right. He was very bright, so he knew that technically he was still failing. We did that about 2 or 3 weeks. I was up the night before, 2 o'clock in the morning, sick to my stomach, knowing I had to give him the test the next day, knowing his reaction if he didn't do well, and we worked the words to death, so did his mom. And it occurred to me, this was before I knew about these, but it occurred to me that in the process of dictation, he does fine. What if I do the spelling test the way I do dictation? So the next day I said, I'm going to do the spelling test like we do dictation. I'm going to say it twice, you're going to say it twice, you're going to write it once. He missed 1. Because what I didn't know at the time is he needed this. He needed this. So we've shared that at presentations. We had a teacher, we had a district in Texas that saw a presentation by a colleague. He gave the presentation, the district bought, they purchased, he went back to do training a week and a half later. The teacher raised her hand and she said, hey, you know, I used that when he got to this part in the training. She said, I used that for vocabulary. And he's thinking, lady, I told you spelling. What do you do? And she's like, no, it's great, let me tell you. 25 students, she had about 11 or 12 of them that would pass the vocabulary test every week, about half. She had about 7 or 8 of her students receiving special services. The rest were regular ed. All she did different was on Monday, she gave the vocabulary words in this process. And on Friday, she tested them the same way. On Friday, 24 out of 25 of her students passed the vocabulary test with a B or above. And the only one that didn't pass it was regular ed, and she refused to say it back. This process, if you take nothing away from today, but you do everything that you're teaching and practicing with this process of dictation, it will jump your scores 10-fold because of this. Multisensory, all of this is going on. So now does it make you feel better about saying it back? Good, all right, so you're saying it back. Yeah, we got that, all right. So below lowercase f, let's do the 2-letter slide. Ba, ba, say it back. Ba, ba. Good, do the 2-letter slide, ba. What are you going to put under that 2-letter slide? An arrow. Good, hold it up and show me when you think you've got it. So in that time, you heard it, you said it, you wrote it, and you dang well read it again because you didn't want to be embarrassed and hold it up wrong, right? Turn to your neighbor, see if you've got the same thing they have, if you're doing okay. Good. All right, let's do the next slide. Are you ready? The 2-letter slide, fa, fa. Say it back. Fa, fa. What is A's, sweetheart, you are not the only one who did this. What is A's sound? Ah. What would this slide, don't erase. Put your sock puppet away. What would this slide actually say? Fa. What did I want? Fa. What vowel says ah? I do this one on purpose for teachers because you don't realize you went on automatic pilot. Do, re, mi, fa, father, fawn, right? But so often our students think you thought you wrote what I said. But until I point out to you, if you ever go up to a student and say, oh, it should be an O, change it, you just totally blew teaching right there. Do not tell them what they, don't just fix it for them. They have to be cognizant of what they did. I want her to see what she actually wrote. What did you actually write? What does A's sound, what is it? Ah, so what did you write? Fa, what did I want? Fa, please write, if you did this, which I think was almost all of you, write F-O next to it, to the side. That's why you're writing a column too, because you want to put the correct answer. Did you do it right? Good girl. Good, you got to help you did it right. And it's not right or wrong, it's just your perception right there, okay? So this is a vital part of learning, is teaching them to look at what they actually put down, yeah? So now I want her to compare. What is this one? Fa. Everyone say with me. What is this one? Fa. What is this one? Fa. Do it again. Fa. What is this one? Fa. Which one did I want? Cross out fa. Now do you see what happened? How aware you are of what you did, what you need to do? That's so empowering for your students, because if you just fix it for them, they really didn't learn anything in that process. And I know sometimes that comes from like you're hurrying and you're trying to fix stuff, but taking the time to do that is probably the most valuable time you can spend to help them become aware of that. All right, because if I give you this word, y'all would have aced it. Let's do the real word, fog. Fog, fog, fog. There was a thick fog when I drove into work today. You could do things like erase the letter that says B, so I could do phonemic awareness. I could do erase in alphabetical order. Lots of things you can do for erasing. Word that sounds like, or vocabulary. So the erasing can be as much of the learning as the writing down. Go ahead and just erase your board. The next thing I'm going to move to are blends, okay? Blends are 2 or 3 consonants standing together that retain their own sound and must be able to begin a word. They don't create a new sound, okay? They still get to keep their own sound. So why would I mark it? Well, that seems kind of silly. Let's look at the process here. I need the definition of a blend. 2 or 3 consonants standing together that retain their own sound and must be able to begin a word. A true blend doesn't split in syllabication. It's different than MP, LD, ND. They'll split. A true blend doesn't split. So they need to know that early on. That needs to be automatic. So by the time they get to syllabication, it's easy. Anything in our program that's a unit is art. What I mean by a unit is this. It either creates a sound together and or moves together. Okay? So the process of how we're going to work on the pronunciation and blending, exactly the same. Slide, real word, nonsense word. So I'm going to take those blends. I'm going to arc them together, identify those blends. There's 6 L blends, 7 R blends, 8 S blends, a few 3-letter S blends, a couple extra blends. Process is the same. Put it in a slide, still going to arc that. So what would this slide be? Gla. What's that word? Glad. Now you're all scared because you're afraid to say the vowel wrong. What's this one? Fra. What's this one? From. And this slide? Smith. And this slide? Smith. Let me show you something really cool, how powerful that simple CK skill is. Why do I have SC and SK if both make the same sound? The CK skill. If you want to say scat cat, which one am I going to use? SC. If I want to say skip, which one do I use? Sorry, my marking's off. Yeah? Okay? That's still going to work all the way throughout. That's why that's so powerful. It's consistent. Okay? So then they're working with words like that. Moving on, I won't, again, you'd practice dictation with this. I won't because of time. Because here's what's my favorite part. We're going to move now from the step of just marking the word to getting to prove the vowel sounds. Getting to prove that. We are going to use the real diacritical markings of the brev and the macron. Am I good to erase this? Everybody's got it that wanted it? If not, hopefully a neighbor's got it. Okay, so I'm going to borrow a darker one for a second. Can I swap you for a second? Okay, so let's say the sounds of these vowels. Say them with me. A, e, a, I. Good, do it faster. A, e, a, I. Oh, faster. A, e, a, I. Good. You can say that took us a short amount of time. Now, what's the names of these vowels? Say it with me when I get to it. A, E, O, U, I. Now you can purposely make that even longer, but you can say that took us longer. That's the long sound of the vowel. Well, now that you know that a vowel can be long or short, we're going to give you skills to prove whether it's long or short within a word, within a syllable. I want you to indicate to me whether the vowel is long or short, but you don't want to have to write short above every vowel or long above every vowel. That would be annoying. So here's what you're going to do. Watch closely. If I erase everything but the bottom of my S, I'm left with the brev. If I erase everything but the bottom of my L, I'm left with the macron. That's cool, yeah? So that helps them know what that mark means. It's not just some random mark. If you have little darlings, and you will, who will go, does it take any longer to say the name than the sound? Then you can say this is the sound of the vowel, because it really isn't a duration thing. And you still use the bottom of the S. And the other thing I say is, what is at the top of every one of your papers? Name with a line to write your name on. Line means name. Line means name. Okay? So then they're going to get lots of practice recognizing those marks. Now we're going to prove it. All right, my process is still the same. I get to mark my vowel underneath. What is this word, class? Prove it to me. Now that you know E can say E or E, why is it short and not long? Why? I want you to tell me why. There are lots of things. Yeah, we all kind of have our ideas, we get a sense, but we want a common way to explain this for our students. What matters? Here's the thing. It is only what follows our vowels that determine their pronunciation, never what precedes it. Let me say that again. It is only what follows our vowels that determine their pronunciation, never what precedes it. This consonant has squat to do what this says, but what follows it does. So my pattern to prove now is going to be to come up and around the end of my word and work back towards my vowel. So like pretend you have a little car and you're going to stay on the road and come up and around. Okay? Do I have a consonant following my vowel? Yes. In our program we call it a guardian consonant. What does a guardian do? Watches over, protects. Okay, guardian's job is to protect the vowel and keep it short. Phonetic skill 1 is you've got one guardian consonant, the vowel will be short. One guardian consonant and nothing else following the vowel will be short. So my vowel sound is eh, and what's my word? My son that did a CVC pattern type of program, he got the word IN and he couldn't prove it because there was an initial consonant, but that didn't change the vowel sound. If you mark what makes the vowel pronunciation, then he got it, okay? Second phonetic skill, very simple, working left to right, marking my vowel U. MP is not a blend. Come up and around as I work back, though they act as two guardians, so my vowel is also going to be short. The visual indicator, if you've got a guardian star, you're going to have a short vowel. So my vowel sound is my word is jump. You want to make as clear as connections as possible. Kids who struggle particularly will not make the same connections. They may put the brev up there but pronounce that long. Draw the connections for them. And you say, so your vowel sound is short. So what's your vowel sound? What's your word? Say the vowel sound before they say the word. Yeah? Third phonetic skill, working left to right. Do I have a guardian this time? Phonetic skill 3 is this. When a vowel stands alone, it is long. By the way, on this bookmark, you have all 5 of these skills. Okay? This one has 42 sounds and your blends. And on the back of this will be your 2 skills for syllabication. So you've got all the core stuff on those bookmarks.
You'll want to keep those and put them in your course reader along with the handout that she's given you. They need to go in your course reader.
Okay, so again, just let me point out, we don't say when the vowel's at the end of a word it's long. We're very intentionally laying the foundation because these are not only single syllable words but syllable types. So a vowel can be alone in a syllable, at the end of a syllable, yeah. So we got to be careful how we word that. Okay, so when a vowel stands alone, it's long. Fourth phonetic skill, I have till 10 till, right? They told me 10 till?
Yes.
Sort of? Okay, good. All right, good. I'll hurry. Okay, S blend, yes. First, mark both vowels is, wow, we've got more than one vowel in this word for the first time, yeah? They're going to learn that when E is at the end of a word and it's not the only vowel, guess what? It's always, never should say always in English, most of the time, but we'll say always right now for the little ones. It's going to be silent every time. Mark that baby silent. Cross all the way through the X because you want them to be able to count their X's to know how many working vowels they have, which will tell them how many syllables they're going to have. There's 2 vowels here, but only one is working. That's why this word is only 1 syllable. As I work back towards to prove that vowel sound, if this E can reach the vowel, meaning it's right next to it or only has one consonant in between, that vowel is going to be long. Okay? Phonetic skill 4 is when you have a silent E at the end of the word, the previous vowel is long. Then they're able to explain, what's this word? Pin. Why is it pin? See, now you guys all can answer it. In 2 seconds, you guys, the first time were like, oh, you have verbiage. It's got a guardian. It's short. What is this word? Why is it pine? Because a silent E, it makes their first vowel long. How empowering is that for your students to be able to explain why? Why? Fifth and final phonetic skill, 2 vowels adjacent. We teach the term adjacent are right next to each other. I am adjacent to the table. Yeah, these 2 vowels are adjacent to each other. When that happens, the most common pattern, which is all we're going to teach at first, one thing at a time, is the second one is going to be silent and the first one will be long. Okay? T would not be a guardian here. It has nothing to guard. There's adjacent vowel pattern rules. That second one is silent, first one is long. T is just giving us an ending sound. Okay? So, there they are. 5 phonetic skills, very simple. 1 guardian short, 2 guardians short. Stands alone, long, silent E, long. Adjacent vowel, second one silent, first one is long. That's it. Okay? So now we can take those skills and apply it to these words and explain why. There are things like teaching inflectional suffixes, the pronunciations for why, that if I had time I could show you on those, using the 5 phonetic skills for that are so awesome. Okay, but I'm going to point you to a place that you can learn more with more time. So, decoding skill 1. Now we're going to apply the ways to break this down to a syllable. Or break it down in syllables, excuse me. Okay, the simplest form of a word that we can make out of that would be a consonant and a vowel. We can prove it, whether it's real or nonsense. Stands alone, it's long. How would you say that? Okay, how would I say this? Because you have a guardian. How would you pronounce this? Because you have a? Yes, all right, crap. This is a little bit different, yeah? Okay, our E's not at the end. We can't cross it off. I have 2 working vowels. Every syllable has to have a working vowel or vowel sound. So how many syllables do I have? 2. I can count my X's. So I got to handle this a little bit differently. My process is always the same and consistent, working left to right underneath, marking everything underneath the word. Once I realize I've got more than one working vowel, I'm going to come back to the first one and look at what's immediately following it or in between my 2 vowel sounds. How many consonants are in between my vowel sounds? 1, that letter T. Okay? When I have 1, I'm referring to the consonant. When I have 1, immediately following my vowel, or in between the vowel sounds of a multisyllable word, I will apply decoding skill 1. 1, 1. Decoding skill 1 is that 1 will run or go on with the next syllable. If you've got 1, you will always divide in front of 1. Now look, I can just ignore that. I can take this a piece at a time. First syllable, is that vowel going to be long or short? Long, because phonetic skill 3 applies. Stands alone. Every one of these 5 phonetic skills will apply to every syllable, every time, in correlation with the 42 sounds that we don't have time to finish. But that works, okay? Second syllable, is it going to be long or short? Short. How come? Got a guardian. So now you just prove that word. What is it? Okay? Then, what this opens up for him. Why those blends are so important? Because a true blend doesn't split. So when they see 2 consonants following that first vowel but realize, oh, it's a unit, it moves together, then they can still divide and prove that word correctly. Okay? Second decoding skill, working left to right. What's the first thing I'm going to do? Mark my vowels. Okay, so that's consistent. That very first thing we did, I know we did really fast, but mark your vowels. How many working vowels do I have? 2. So many syllables. So I got to divide, yeah? Come back to my first vowel. How many consonants in between this time? 2. Is MP a blend? Here's the way you tell. Can you start a word with it? No. That's a great differentiator. True blend, you can start a word with it. You can't start a word with MP. If there's 2 and it's not a blend, you apply decoding skill 2. 2 will split. Okay? Really easy. 2 split. First syllable, is that going to be long or short? How come? Now you notice I'm not doing the guardian stars at this point. A lot of our students, they can wean them off of that at this point. That's why I don't see it. Second syllable, same thing. Yeah, so what's my word? That is it. 1 will run, 2 will split, works to divide every word every single time. That might seem a little too good to be true, right? Like, yeah, lady, whatever, you're lying, right? What if there's more than 2 consonants in between? Like this word. How many consonants are between my first E and my second E? Here's what is so cool. The only reason you ever have more than 2 consonants between your vowel sounds is there will always be a blend or a digraph. So 1 will run, 2 will split, will actually truly work for every word, every time. Okay? So I'm going to divide where? Between the X and the T, because those 2 will split. There's your unit. So is my first E going to be long or short? Because you've got a guardian in that syllable. What's my second syllable going to look like? That silent E, right? So what's my word? Okay? So what that opens up for students, when we're able to finish the 42 sounds, the murmur diphthongs, okay, the digraphs, the special vowel sounds, what that opens up for them. But here's the thing. Now, words like this, they hold no power over your students because the length of the word is no longer an issue. If I can apply those skills, every word I can figure out. Okay? And that's so empowering. A teacher explained it to me this way that I think is the most eloquent way to, or the one that made the most sense to me. Can you guys see the arrow in the FedEx logo? How many of you have ever seen it before? Okay, now let me point it out. Okay? I have seen that FedEx logo a bazillion times, but until that was pointed out to me, I had no idea there was an arrow in there. The students that you have may have come across our language 100 times. But there is a very systematic, streamlined framework to our language, but for a lot, until we explicitly point it out, they don't see it. But once I point it out, do you see it now? It's all you see. That's what you do for your students with a program like this. You change the way they see words. And once you point it out to them this way, their brains get rewired, the senses are all brought in. That's the way they see words for the rest of their lives.